So, good evening, everybody. So today we'll be understanding about like what is Cold War and post-Cold War era and how the concept of superpower has emerged, so especially after the World War II and the destruction that has caused by it, and how did this the polarity in the world has changed, and we came down to the concept of like a real war to a concept of Cold War. So first, let us understand then this all these things we have spoken about it in the last previous classes, previous lectures where like how did the brink of the World War One, World War Two led to the creation of peaceful institutions and also led to the creation of the changes or the shifts bringing out the powers and the nations with the changes in polarity in the world structure and how the other nations have really been bandwagoning themselves with this such powers. So today we'll be understanding about like what is the concept of superpower and how has been the world in the Cold War era and the post-Cold War era. First, let us understand what is a superpower. So, really, see, if we talk about any of such words, you should understand that they have been coined or like used for the first time by some of the proponents, some of the intellectuals. So, if you understand or if you remember well and good, then it will be very useful for you to writing the competitive exams. So what happens in this one is it is first coined by William T. Fox. So William T. Fox is the first person who have used the word superpower. I mean, how did William T. Fox explain what is this word superpower mean? See, you might have come across two way along that now without saying anything, you would have understood what is a superpower, what is a bipolarity, what is a polarity in your life. But initially, when it was coined, it was barely known. Like, how do you describe in international relations, in international space? You need certain things to be defined, okay? Because one country projects itself as a meaning according to itself. The other countries could be projecting it as per their niche. So for you to understand, you should know the definitions behind the words we are using. You cannot simply use the vocab just like that. You use it for any other thing. But international relations, you have to be very particular about why are you bracketing or putting that country in such boxes. So let us understand like what is superpower. It is a great power so that it can be deployed in any strategic places as opposed to a great power whose interests are confined to a single region. So this great power is nothing but who is strong enough to be deployed or who is strong enough to be doing things or controlling the war-like situations or controlling the other nations. In any position you put them, they could tackle the situation when come back. So that is what you term any country as a superpower. So this what does this superpower countries have? So these superpower countries are capable and they are very strong to intervene and interfere in any part of the world. They are not just confined. So what does the statement mean? They are not just confined to any particular place, any particular geographical entity. But if you drop them in any part of the world, they are very powerful that they'll bounce back and they can control that region and they can control the geographical structural position of that region. So that is why they have the capacity and strength to intervene in any part of the world. Then how does this happen? This happens without it's affecting their own power, prestige, and population. Example, you talk about USA. So USA, without disturbing its population, without disturbing its economy, without disturbing its power structure, it has involved in West Asian revolutions. It has tried exerting its power in Afghanistan, Iran, all this Syria war, etc. So it how was it how is it capable how is it possible for a country like USA? Because it is a superpower, it is capable of controlling all such things. So that's why it could be able to control such things and it came to be known as a superpower. So that's what it's. it's like you have to be strong enough to intervene in any part of the world, and you have to deploy yourself strategically without affecting your own power, prestige, and population, and your own political structure in your state. Then, what is a major power? So, there's a difference between major power and the superpowers that can do. So, where it has all the elements of power, nuclear power, and capacity to maintain a balance of power. So, how do you address that? Any country is powerful by looking at its standing military, by looking at its ideological structure, by looking at its nuclear power and its opinion or its notion in balancing this concept of balance of power in the world with other countries. Then superpowers can project military, economy, political power all over the world all the time. Why do you think that the trade war between USA and China is deemed to be called as or on the brink of happening as a third world war? Because these two are so influential, these two are so powerful that they are running the world markets. If you have seen the world markets crashing everywhere, then it is because of this two superpowers fighting on a trade tariff war. So that is why the superpowers have capacity to project their military, to deploy their military in any part of the world, and they can control the economy and political structure, and they can influence any corner, any nook of the world at any point of time. So that's why it's not that simple to tag any country as a superpower, right? So they have been able to establish themselves in this crude, harsh world, international space for so long that they were able to express their power. They were able to express their concern for that balance that need to be maintained for rather in order them to be called as a superpower. Then superpowers explain if structure is bipolar, unipolar, or multipolar. So if we can call it like with the existence of each country to be called as a superpower. In that notion, you can understand that whether there exists a bipolarity, whether there exists a unipolarity, or whether there exists a multipolarity. So initially, it was a multipolar world during the world wars. So you can understand that multipolar worlds are unstable. Then immediately after the Second World War, it was the bipolar world because the Cold War during era there were only two parts because the UK has been destructed, especially because of the war redundancy of the Second World War and the First World War, and there were only two superpowers which emerged after the World War II was USA, which dominated the space for quite a period of time until the Russia had tested its nuclear weapon. So after that, the world had came to be known as a bipolar world, and it went on till the disintegration of USSR in 1990s. So that's why the superpowers, this existence of superpowers, can clearly mention the polarity of the world, whether it's multipolar or the bipolar. Then next we'll talk about how which country could be called as a superpower or what is uh, how did this evolve? So emergence of superpowers started with end of Second World War. So USA and USSR emerged as Eurocentric world fell to the war destructions. So US and USSR especially came to be called as a superpowers because the Europe country, Eurocentric world has really destructed, especially with the World War destruction and the post-war destruction and economy fell. It was very busy in restructuring itself. So these two powers had controlled the world, and the whole world was divided based on two blocks: Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc, or Communist Bloc or the Capitalist Bloc. So like this, the world was divided. So the world was bipolar back then after the World War II. Then post Cold War, USA has emerged as a superpower until 1949, just now have said. Why? Because immediately after the post World War, the world was restructuring itself and couldn't evolve from the war destruction that has been caused by it. So that's why they have been said to be called USA had ruled the world or dominated the world as being a superpower, a single superpower until 1949. Especially, it projected its power how. So you should ask a question like how and when did it came to be called as a superpower? Like why? What was the purpose? Especially with the dropping of the bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the Cold War, in the Second World War. This the destruction that it has caused. And the moment where the other powers or the Russia did not had such type of capacity, so that's why the USA was able to project its power and came to be known as a superpower until 1949, where Russia got to do the tests and it was declared as a nuclear power later. So even the Pearl so know what took place on American soil, you can see. Why was it? Because it was following a protectionist policy and it did not interfere much of its space in World War One and Two. It was only, and also it stayed most of the part outside of the World War One and Two. Most of the part it stayed outside. So the destruction also did not cause, and the war did not cause on its land. So there were nothing to repair. So in fact, it was more of industrialized and keeping itself very active in developing itself. So that's why they were able to emerge as a superpower. So even the Pearl Harbor also it emerged more strongly. The response to the Pearl Harbor attack by Japan on USA was retaliation given to it by Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You can also see this. Then no, France was occupied for 4 years, and USSR was target for German invasion. So and also America shown the technological advancement till 1953. So, like all these things, you can understand that how the things were working. And in 1947, it had come with a Marshall Plan. Now, what is the Marshall Plan of 1947? So, Marshall Plan is nothing but it's an American program. It's an American program to do the restructuring of Europe, especially after the World Wars. So America was helping Europe with funds to establish industries and repair the post-war destruction with the plan with the economic incentives that it was given by the USA. Then emergence of Soviet as a superpower, it established communist regimes in Poland, Eastern European countries under the Nazi control. And the population reduced to 20 million, steel production was cut half, and also it was expanded territory to Baltic countries, Ukraine, Russia, South Sakhalin and Kuril Islands. Then communist revolution in China also led to the strong contending status to the Soviet Union. So the revolution in Russia in 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution, has really caused the Europe and the Western Bloc to be careful of rise of communism in the other parts of the Europe. But the communist revolution in China, I think it was in 1949. Correct me if I'm wrong, so led to the contending status to the Soviet Union. And also Soviet Union also invested in science and tech and nuclear power. So it also gave uh, its projection. It also gave its part to be called as a superpower. Then countries camped with Soviet and Bulgaria in 1946, Poland in 1947, Czechoslovakia and East Germany in 48, China 49, North Korea 50, Vietnam 54, Afghanistan 78, and Cambodia 1979. Then the superpowers led to the mass production of nuclear weapons, which escalated the tensions in the world. So now, what happened was USA thought that it could be the only sole power that will be emerging. So, but it did not expect the Russia to take the position of the superpower. So, till then, it was USA that was doing this arms race, the accumulation of arms and the nuclear powers. But with Russia came to be called as a nuclear power, then there emerged the notion of arms race, which led to these two countries engaging themselves in arms race and focusing or diverting their most of the money in accumulating these weapons where they want to be like war ready. So they want to project their power like this. So that's how the the Cold War era, there has been like, it was also cold, but there has been the more of tensions which could collapse or the world in a brink of a second. So this is how the superpower concept or the countries have came to be called as a superpower. Now let us understand like what is Cold War. So what is Cold War? So what is Cold War? So Cold War can be traced back to 1917 Russian Revolution. But the question arises of why? Why the 1917 Russian Revolution? Because the capitalist world or the Western world was really scared that the Russian Revolution could take the power, could take the position of its capitalist world with the revolutions that has been rapidly happening in the Europe and the Western side. So that's why socialist system emerged as an opposition. They thought that this is their competition, and this has emerged as an opposition to the capitalist system. So the Germany also attacked the USSR for violating its non-aggression pact in 1939. So in that notion also, Russia had joined allied powers. Then it had led to Berlin crisis in 1948. Then USSR stopped the western expansion of USA, Britain and France by blocking the Berlin borders. So this crisis is nothing but USSR had stopped the expansion of the Western world into the side of USSR or the communist world with this blocking of the borders, which had caused the countries to confront. But the Truman Doctrine came up and it had avoided the direct confrontation with USSR. But instead, it supplied also their aid, most of its aid to the West Germany. So this is how the Cold War dates back to 1917, and how did the rivalry between USA and USSR have really come into picture. Now, who coined this word Cold War? It was coined by Bernard Baruch. He refers it to an intense hostility and tension. So Cold War is nothing but the hostility. It's not an actual war is happening, but a war-like situation has caused, and we never know how long this war-like situation will stay. So, and this war-like situation will cause tensions, which build up tension among the member countries, so that they'll be always war ready. So, how do you keep yourself war ready? By accumulating a lot of arms, by diverting most of your funds to maintaining standing military, and by having this other countries by your side, by making bandwagoning of the countries that you could be supported if there's a war-like situations. So all these things have led to the concept, the arising of the concept Cold War. So what was the world polarity was like when the world was declared as a Cold War was going on in the world? So it was bipolar world. So you could see there were only two powers that was existing, communist and the socialist. Communist and the capitalist. So it was only USA and USSR that was hap the world really had it. So the bipolar world had led rise to the rise of Cold War. Then this NATO is a program of USA. So this program of USA, which had expanded into the Turkey and Greece in 1952 and West Germany in 1955. So this NATO is a military organization by the Western world. So to counter that, the Warsaw Pact was signed by Eastern world, the Russia, to counter the emergence of NATO. Now the world had really gone through another crisis of which we call it the Korean Peninsula crisis, where it was occupied by Soviet and American in 1948. So if you go through the North Korea and South Korea, the parallel line was drawn, especially with the occupying of those lands by USA and USSR. Then Soviet occupied this north of 38th. Then the 38th parallel line was drawn. It was called as 38th parallel line. So this parallel line, the north to it is occupied by Soviet, and the south to it is occupied by America. So that's why it came to be known as North Korea and South Korea. Then Security Council also took an action against it as the Russia representative was not present to veto it. And 16 countries participated in that American occupation operation, and North Koreans were successful earlier, but the truce was signed in 1953. So this is how the Korean crisis, Korean 38th parallel line was drawn, and this has led to more tensions between Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc. So now there are certain phases of the Cold War. First one is growing mistrust and intensification of the conflict in 1946 and 53. And second one is relaxation of Cold War and detente. Third one is new Cold War 1979. Fourth one is end of Cold War. So in these four notions, you can understand or establish like the Cold War, why there was how the war has emerged and how it has called the world to um, be an what can we say, be an uh, be an actor acting as per such two powers. So now let us understand like what happened in this phase one of growing mistrust and intensification of conflict in 1946 and 53. So what happened in 1946 and 53? It led to the spread of communism in East, and America wanted to contain it. So with the revolution, with the communist revolution that has been happening all around the world, the America thought that it is very important to contain any of that revolution happening. So it was very suspicious of the communist revolution to be happening in the Eurocentric world, and they thought that the Russia could expand itself. So it was mainly to oppose Russia and contain it. Uh, it led to the concept of growing mistrust and intensification of conflict. So it contained Russia indirectly with two policies of containment. The first one could be the Truman Doctrine in 1947, where the Truman Doctrine was made in 1947, in which USA can interfere in any of the things, and it can check the spread of communism. So this is one of the most straightforward way to control the expansion of communist world. So this is very important for you to understand at the Cold War era. So if you remember the timeline, then it would be easy for you to understand why the political structures of these countries are there as such. So then next, first one is Truman Doctrine and next one is Marshall Plan. So Marshall Plan is nothing but recovery program for Europe after the Second World War. So both superpowers avoided direct confrontation but engaged in operation to stop allies from defecting. See, the Cold War era, these two superpowers were very smart that they did not go for this war like situation to real war where these two countries have fought on one to one in their own motherland, but rather this whatever was happening, it was happening in a third party, and it was happening as a part where the operations were kind of doing to stop the expansion of each other. Then what happened? The Soviets sent East Germany troops to East Germany in 1953 Hungary in 1956, Czechoslovakia in 1967, 1968, and Afghanistan in 1975. So what happened again? USA also expanded its position in overthrowing some of the governments. So, for example, in Guatemala, 1954, USA overthrew its left-wing government, but with invasion of Cuba in 1967, it was unsuccessful. We all know how the Bay of Pigs invasion really went down as an humiliation to the America, and it led to tensions that were created among these superpowers in the world, especially with the nuclear weapons pointed out at each other. Then it invaded Dominican Republic in 1965, Grenada in 1983, but it was unsuccessful long time to prevent communism in Vietnam from bringing South Vietnam under its rule. The Soviets supplied ammunition. So one of the greatest failure of USA is their Vietnam War, which was fought for too long. You can see like 64 to 75, where most of the investments, the army personals, everything that was installed by America was a great or huge losses or humiliation that it has faced during 1965 to 79, 75. So then relaxation of second phase would be relaxation of Cold War or the detente. So now this period, it did not actually do anything as such. But in 1960, the crisis in Cuba after the installation of communist power, then US people wanted to topple government. Similarly, USSR sent armed protection for Cuba to war like for aggression. Then USA backed off, Soviet withdrew missiles. Cuba tension was settled with Bay of Pigs invasion. So this is how the relaxation or the detente period have come into the picture, especially with USA's humiliation to Cuban occupation. So what happened that was in 1960 in Cuba, there was a communist government that came to power. So, but USA wanted to topple that government because it did not want the communism to grow actually literally behind in the backyard. So it had tried to topple that government. But in a way of toppling that government, the Cuba had taken the support of USSR, where USSR had sent its army and its protection for the Cuba. Okay, so in a view of that, what happened? See, here Cuba is right below USA, but USSR is somewhere else. But the war was fighting in the backyard of. So that's why USA thought that if there's actually any war-like situation, then it would be really a loss. Okay, it would really be a loss to USA itself. That's why it had taken its forces back and it had controlled the situation. So it was settled, almost all settled. Then it's also called Bay of Pigs invasion. If you're really preparing for MCQs or if you're really preparing for competitive exam, this is very important. Then the nuclear proliferation treaties have also been underwent and most of them were unsuccessful. We can call it. So 1951 or 61, if I'm not wrong, it's outer space Antarctica Treaty, then comes Outer Space Treaty, then comes PTBT. So PTBT is nothing but Partial Test Ban Treaty. So this Partial Test Ban Treaty is nothing but to control the test of nuclear weapons. So it had come up with a policy or the treaty saying that the underground, the seabed, the air, and on land, nuclear testing should be banned, but it allowed the underground testing. So that's why it's called partial test ban treaty. But and to control the nuclear weapons in 1963, again the year is also very important. Then ban of use of nuclear testing in 1967 and declared Latin America as a nuclear test free zone. So that's why it was very smart in planning out that if Latin America is free of this nuclear weapons, then the USA could maintain its authority. So that's why, in the purview of that, Latin America was declared as a nuclear test free zone, and the agreements of prohibiting from using seabed for nuclear testing and use of biological weapons in 1971 have also been signed, like biological weapons convention, chemical weapons convention. All these things have really been worked out in this Cold War era. Then in 1972, there has been SALT Treaty, interim arms control, and SALT II in 1979, which decreased the tension in the Cold War. Then 69 and 78, this period really saw the rise of detente. So detente is nothing but to resolve differences or disputes by force and threats, rattling at the conferences. So this is basically like you will be arguing with them in a roundtable conference. You'll be arguing with them in an international organizations, in international conferences, rather than being on actual ground and fighting for it. So then symbol of trust and ability to consider each other a legitimate interest. Then new Cold War has really begun in 1979. This is also very important. It was an important MCQ question until recent times. So when was the new Cold War has started and what is new Cold War? So this is in 1979, and it had started in 1979, and the detente was speak at Helsinki conference in 1975. Again, Helsinki conference timeline is also very important. Now, what happened during this, like what led to the rise of this new Cold War is the in 1970, the Soviet installed its power in Afghanistan, and USA with religious fundamentalists, and the Taliban had opposed this government. So, with Soviet installing a power in Afghanistan, like the Soviet intervening in Afghanistan by installing the power which is favorable to them, USA had tried to oppose this installation of government by Soviet along with the rebels, or the rebels who are known as Talibans. So they tried to oppose this government. Now, this in the purview of detente, this invasion of Afghanistan has led to the rise of new Cold War in 1979. So this has really caused again the tensions between US and USSR in the West Asian region. Then Poland martial law was also imposed in 1981, which led to pro-democracy unrest. And there's been literally a breaking point between USSR, like just like how the World War was happening. Like there are certain events that led to the cause of World War, but there was one event like the murder of Archduke Ferdinand. Just like that, the breakdown point was USSR shot down South Korean civilian who alleged to be spy. So this really led to break the notion of detente, and these countries have started to attack each other. So, in retaliation, what did USA do? It launched intermediate range missile in Europe, but you and the Soviet had cut off talks with America. I mean, they did not meet each other. They did not have any mouth of word in any international conferences, in international organizations that they have been meeting, that they have been happening. So USA invaded Grenada in 1983, and it launched Invisible was Sandinista government in Nicaragua, and it also pushed for development of strategic defense initiatives, or which is also known as Star Wars. And the conflicts outside of Europe gained significance during this period. So this had led to regional Cold War in 1970 between Iran and Iraq. So it's Iraq. It has supposed to be Q. So this really led to shift the regional balances, regional trajectories. So that's why the conflicts have grown to the regional space rather than international, where these countries were trying to exert their position, or play their part in controlling the world. Then next comes end of Cold War. So how did the Cold War end? So Cold War basically it ended due to the fallout of economy of Soviet Union. So it led to the disintegration of USSR. And in 1985, Michael Gorbachev, the Soviet allied states started to abandon communism, especially due to which led to the economic problems because the country was mostly focusing on the arms race, and it had led to the issues of the Cold War, and it had led to the destruction of their economy, and the growth was not really happening because diversion of the funds. So the country Soviet allies states have really started to uh, exert their really started to stop giving their uh, support to the Soviet Union and started disintegrating among themselves. So now, in the purview of this, what happened was Hungary and Poland, they have entered this free market policies. So they abandoned their communism and they've started this capitalistic tendencies. And Petroiska is really nothing but it's a economic restructuring of and political system of Russia. Then there's another thing called as glasnost. This is greater openness and individual freedom that to be given to this member countries. And the globalization and the turmoil led USA using market system transfer labor to services to reorganize their heavy industries and switch to computer. So, but Soviet was badly successful in doing the such things because most of the economy was collapsing because the money was largely diverted to accumulate weapons, which they would be using in order to balance themselves with USA in any war-like situation. So it had spent most of its amount on accumulating these arms and weaponry. It did not do any reconstruction programs for better functioning of their economy. So that was over and all in all the failure of USSR and disintegration had really led to rise of USA as a sole unipolar power. But by then, as the globalization happened and the world was really opening up and it was came to be known as the global village or the new global divide. So it was really the USA had exerted its again sole unipolar authority for some of the years, where later on it was followed or continued by China with the rise of China and US, India and various other powers, where it led to the rise of multipolarity. Then in 1989, the Soviet Union abandoned their 9-year war in Afghanistan and it refused to send military aid to satellite states because it was struggling, right? So the Soviet itself was struggling with the economy. So they had accepted their fate and they refused to support this governments and their satellite states by funding them by withdrawing their fund. This led to the fall of Berlin in 1989 and the reunion of Germany, like the reunification of Germany has happened west with east. Then 1990, the October, Germany was reunited, and 1991, the Warsaw Pact was dissolved, and the communist regime came to an end since the October Revolution, which had happened in 1917. And the Soviet broke into 15 republics. In 1991, December 25, Gorbachev recognized the collapse and declared that Soviet Union was bankrupt. So this is how the rise and fall of Russia and the humiliations faced by USA in the Vietnam War and the arms race that have led for the other smaller nations to accumulate weapons and the nuclear war race that all the treaties that these countries have come up with. This is how, all in all, how the Cold War era, Cold War phase has been going on for a country. Then what happened after the Cold War? Like what was really the result of Cold War? So Cold War, you all know it resulted in the race for nuclear arms and weapons. Because if you've been looking at it now, especially with India and Pakistan on better terms with uh, coming out of nuclear India's water treaty, and the both countries were nuclear weapon states. So, and it's on the brink of the war-like situation. So you can understand that the Cold War has really led for this member nations to accumulate the weapons and divert their funds in accumulating in maintaining the military. Then alliances like NATO, Warsaw, Kyoto Center answers were formed. UNO became ineffective again. Then new independent nations like Africa, Latin America kept their distance from superpowers because these countries have formed another third bloc which came to be known as NAM, non-aligned movement. So this is not a neutral bloc, but rather it objected the policies and followed by the USA and USSR, these two superpowers in the Cold Bloc during the Cold War. And it also led to the poverty and health issues, and it led to the over expenditure, especially the military and accumulation of arms and wealth, and it disturbed the peace of the world. Because if two superpowers were about to fight, even though it's a Cold War, you never know how quickly the Cold War could turn into a hot war. So this really had disturbed the other parts of the world. Then what had happened the post-Cold War, like how the world was after the post-Cold War, and how did the events go after the first Cold War, sorry, post-Cold War is it really began from 1991 until 2001. So it until 2001, in this 1991 till 2001, USA had again have come to dominate the world. So if the world was unipolar, but in the second phase of the world with the regional powers, China, India, and Europe, they have been really coming into power. So the world was came to be known as a multipolarity world. So, and this is one of the implications of the Cold War, where the multipolarity have come into picture and the rise of unipolarity could be seen in issues like during 1990 invasion of Kuwait by Iraq and the Gulf crisis that had led for the USA to exercise its power and exert dominance in such areas. And also this was extended mostly to Central and East European and in the name of expansion of NATO in the under the disguise of partnership for peace. Then what happened to European Union was with the demolition of Berlin Wall and expansion in 2004 by Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and 2007 in Bulgaria and Romania. This had really expanded the world, the European world, to become the market economies and democracies were established. Then North-South conflict had begun because the fragmentation and marginalization of South had led to the rise of the differences that had caused in the development and use of trade, nuclear weapons, economy, then International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and their restructuring programs, WTO extending their tentacles and making these countries to be dependent on them or making them fall into this debt trap had been on rise. Then Asia Pacific as a new subsystem had emerged where you could see other regional organizations like APEC and where this largest it came to be known as the largest economy, especially with the member countries like USA, Japan, China, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, and South Korea. Then the multinational corporations, due to WTO's clot, they have increased their presence in the southern divide. So in the southern nations, these MNCs have been really trying to expand their tentacles and their capitalistic tendencies. Then let's talk about United Nations that we have highly of it in the last class. So what really did United Nations do? United Nations reduced the use of veto because there was no really powerful country. Then the collective action among United Nations could be seen during the Iraq war, like the Gulf War of 1991. But the Security Council decision on Iraq, Libya, Bosnia, Serbia, and human rights and nuclear-free zones shows that U.S. Zionism and influence. Because why do you expect that USA has been exerting its influence? Because it is a major funder. It funded majorly to the United Nations organizations. So it thinks that it can control that organization, and the decisions were one-sided, and the decisions were whatever the decisions were taken, they were mostly in favor of USA only. So it turned a blind eye to some of the events that had happened. Now, next is extension of NPT, Nuclear Proliferation Treaty in 1995. So this had really seen the opposition from NAM, Non-Aligned Movement, and the Third World, and the clash of civilization that has been given by Samuel P. Huntington in the book Clash of Civilization. It says that conflicts of future will purely cultural and based on the fault lines. So, like the clash of civilization is not nothing like the Jesus Christ or the Confucius or Muhammad on unequal power, but it's a culture of expression of conflict, and the religious fundamentalism, which has been used by the state policy, is a matter of concern for the world. Then NAM also have become irrelevant because it was all only able to act as a pseudo organization. It was not helpful really in extending its power to in many of the powerful events. So it was also very unsuccessful. Then emergence of new Cold War origin. So new Cold War concept has been given by Edward Lucas. This is also very important. And this is nothing but the recent uh, war with Russia and Ukraine. So that is called as new Cold War. Then it's more of Ukraine is a proxy state of USA, which only aim is to defeat Russia. And this is of a more broader conflict because with multipolarity in rise and various countries that have been, exerting their influence, and now that other countries also have accumulated the arms or weaponry. So this becomes more complex and broader because it involves most of the nations in the world. So the Greater Eurasia Belt and Road Initiative and BRICS helping in cold confrontation, it lacks rigid ideological power, and it led to the weakening of West desire to slow down and leading to instability and rising of technological invasions. So this has been all in all uh, the the war the how the war has been uh, going on, and how this new Cold War has given the opportunity for the other countries. And but in the purview of economy, in the purview of world becoming better, this Russia-Ukraine crisis had opened up uh, like the countries to take sides, and it had become more complex, like what would happen in future. So it also led to the rise of multipolarization, East and West movement of economic and political shifts. Now, especially with China's global emergence, this is another important notion. That's why the result or the notion was unpredictable because of the rise of China, which is the second largest economy, and the purchasing power, relative economic weight have exceeded that of G7 economies. Then another notion started by America is rebalancing strategy with the failure of Trans-Pacific Partnership and One Belt, One Road, Asia Pacific Free Trade, AIB, BRICS New Development Bank, Act East Asia Policy, Make in India. So all these things, all these things had led to competition between USA and China. So by Farid Zakaria says that the powers outside of the West are nearly like BRICS have 30% of global territory and 45% of global population. Now you can see with these statistics that the outside of the West has been growing its influence, and becoming really powerful in order to understand, uh, in order to engage itself in the things. So this is how the things have been going on, and so this is how you have to understand and read that. How the Cold War, how the notion of Cold War had really changed its presence, and how has the world was able to exert its power, and the USA was able to exert its power, but it was not the same. So it was not the same with the rise of China, with China being. So it was not the same with rise of China and China being in position. So and replacing the position with Russia. So the USA and China, if you look at it, the trade war that they have started recently, you can see the economies and the market economies that had really been and the falling off. So if you look at it, the World War, you can see the trade war is a new Cold War. So I think trade war is a new World War without any destructions to the structures, but the economic structures of the countries have been falling down. So this is how you can understand the Cold War, the post-Cold War, and the superpower that has emerged, like what is superpower and what is the definition of superpower, and who, which, what, when can you say that that country is a superpower? How can you define what are the certain characteristics of a country, nation that need to be called as a superpower? And how did the Cold War era went, and how the d- destruction of the World War One and Two has led to the rise of USA, and when it stayed really a unipolar world until 1949, until the Soviet had tested its nuclear weapon. Like how did these events have went on is what we read today, and what is the post Cold War, like how did it happen, and the rise of new Cold War, especially with the Afghans invasion or intervention by USSR, and the counter intervention by USA with backing up Taliban, and the rise of other regional organizations, especially the APEC, National Development Bank, and all these things in the purview or the outside of the structure which had the Western influences till date, and how the NAM, non-aligned movement, had become irrelevant, especially in the purview of Cold War and with the new Cold War that have started. And what is the new Cold War of this new age Cold War, which is literally fought between Russia and Ukraine? So how will this affect the world in future, and how will this have its impression on the coming economic structure of the world? So this is how you can analyze, looking into the previous notions of how these countries have played, and how far the destruction have come. Relatively, you can compare it with what would happen if these countries um, really go for war, like the real war in coming future, especially with technological advancements and the nuclear weapons and the disasters that these nuclear warheads would cause. So, because initially when the Second World War or the World War One was fought, there were really no nuclear weapons. It was end of the World War Two that it ended with the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But later on, the various other countries have developed or came to be known as the nuclear power state, the five nuclear power states. So imagine the destruction that it would cause if they had really had to go for war, like the real war, or be it even the world is not ready to accept this Cold War also because of the economic destruction or the bad market crashing that has been happening. So I think the World War is nothing but this tariff war that has really been going on between USA and China. So you can read these questions. So there would be questions like they may either ask you to explain what is superpower for short answer, and they may ask you the different phases of Cold War and what had happened during the Cold War. So you can mention all the different phases of the Cold War like growing mistrust and intensification of conflict, then relaxation of Cold War and detente, new Cold War 1979, and end of Cold War. So then you can also write what are the recent prospects of new Cold War and what do you term explain this in the purview of latest events. And also they may ask you the what is detente and what is deterrence. And also they'll also might ask you the arms race that really had went between this superpowers. So I think but I think for this, if we keep up with the semester exams, the important questions would be explain what is Cold War relative events and post Cold War relative events, or what is superpower, define what is superpower. So you can explain it in different phases. So I hope you'll be able to write an answer, a valid answer, not just something that you scribble off, and remember it for your rest of your life for being an discipline in political science. So I hope everybody is clear with this lecture today. So, and you can also write certain treaties like the SALT 1, SALT 2, and the Cuban war crisis. They might also ask you, like, what is Bay of Pigs invasion? How did Cuba really, the brink of warlike situation between USA and USSR in Cuba, which is the backyard of United Nations, and how did the Latin America region came to be known as a non-nuclear, no installation of nuclear weapons, same like the Pelindaba Treaty of Africa, where there would not be installed any nuclear weapons. And also, they might ask you about military organizations like explain NATO or explain Warsaw. Then what are these? They might also ask you a question like NATO or Warsaw. They might ask you, are the international organizations? You can say they are military peacekeeping organizations. So these are all things they can ask you. And when it comes to Cold War, the years are very important. So if you had at least practiced any of the MCQs, then you might have understood that how this Cold War years and the timeline is very important. So make a timeline for all the events that have went into during the Cold War, like fall of rise of America unipolarity, then Berlin crisis, then South Korean crisis, then Vietnam crisis, or all like that. You can come up with these timelines. So I hope you'll be able to write an answer or answer any question. So or give your um, analysis into like how did it cause the destruction to the economy on a wide scale markets. So this is all it for today. So I hope you'll be everybody is clear with the lecture today, and there's a lot to remember in this lecture. So I suggest you go on YouTube, watch the live again, and make important points through the slides that I've given. So that might help you with building up your timeline and building up your answer. So this timeline can help you make a short answer, like the short bullet points. If you make, you can develop your answer by your own. So good luck on understanding superpower, Cold War, and post-Cold War. So the events are not easy. Don't get scared if you are not able to remember such events. It will take time, but you should never lose. You should never give up on understanding what is Cold War. So yeah, so it will be difficult for everybody for a first timer to understand that. So don't be scared. Go through the lecture, repeat it 2, 3 times, then it will be on your fingertips about what events have happened. So see you. That's all for today. See you tomorrow with another lecture in international relations. So yes, go through the lecture again and you'll be able to understand. So see you tomorrow.